Hi, hey, hello, how's it going? It's Emily, and today we're going to be starting the second magical readathon vlog for the fall season. And in the first vlog, I read a few different books. I also went through my TBR and the list of books that I want to read for this month and for this readathon. So if you missed that, I'll be sure to link that down below. I'll also be sure to link more information about the magical readathon in case you aren't familiar. So where we left off in the last one was that I was finished with The Familiar and I was halfway through The Girl with No Reflection, and I'm just filming these clips back to back, so I'm still halfway through this one. And in this one we're following Ying, who's about to marry the prince of this kingdom, and she's not super thrilled about this. Doesn't treat her that well, and she's kind of just been locked in her room for a while. She has access to kind of a garden area as well, but she's really just confined to a pretty small space and isn't really thrilled about that. Hasn't really been told why this is why that's necessary, or if it's just him just not wanting her to have any power, autonomy, or movement around the palace. So she's not really sure what's going on, but she's not happy about it. She notices at the beginning of the story that her reflection is doing some weird things out in this garden. There's an area of water and her reflection is starting to do weird things. And her reflection is smiling even though she isn't, as she's looking down. And there's some other weird things that go on while she's outside towards the beginning of the story that show that something weird is going on with her reflection, and she gets kind of pulled into this reflection, into the mirror, into this reflection world, and she is told by her reflection self that she needs to go out into the regular world for a while to heal, and that she hasn't really been able to heal from an injury for a while, and so she needs to go out to be able to heal some. So our main character agrees, and this sets off a whole series of events where she realizes that her reflected self isn't being completely honest. That's not why she wants to go to the other side, to the regular world, and she starts to realize why this character has wanted to go into the real world, and she is starting to get to know the prince in the reflected world, who is very different than the one in her regular world. And so she's starting to figure out what this world is all about, who the players are, how this world works, why this world is the way that it is, and figuring out some of the history there, and realizes that there's a lot that, she's kind of in the middle of, and it's possible that she is, by going back and forth between, for various reasons throughout the story so far, going back and forth between the real world and the reflected world, she's kind of unintentionally breaking down the barrier between these worlds. And so this is going to have implications for her regular world. And so she's trying to protect the people that she cares about and protect her world and figure out what to do and how to do that. So she's tracking down information about how to do that. She's trying to figure out who she can trust and what's going on. Anyway, I'm having a good time. The villains definitely feel very caricatures, or feel like characters, and so there's not as much depth to this one as there can be in some YA that I've read, but I am having a fun time with it and enjoying it. So I'm gonna keep reading and see what I think about the next half of it, and we'll check in then, and then move through the list that I presented in that TBR, as I said. So check back soon. And it is a few days later. I have finished The Girl with No Reflection. I did have fun with this one. I will say, and I think I said this in the last clip, there wasn't the depth here that I was hoping for. Still had a fun time, but there wasn't that depth, and it was one of those moments where it felt like I could kind of expect the next line in some cases because I had just seen it so many times before of characters reacting that way or saying something that way, or just some of the characters seeming like just a caricature of what they were supposed to be rather than given full depth. And anyway, I don't know. But it was fun though. Like, I still did have a good time with this, but I wasn't super invested, you know what I mean? But yeah, I am now a quarter or so of the way through Cage of Dreams, and this is the follow-up to City of Nightmares, and had fun with City of Nightmares, so I definitely wanted to continue with the series. I'm having fun with this one so far. We're continuing after where our first book left off. It's a short time later. There's not much of a time gap, but you know, our main character has kind of started to come to terms with what happened in the first book, but she still is definitely, and I won't say anything about what happened in the first book, I don't want to spoil it, but she is kind of reeling from what happened in the first book and just feeling like she can't go anywhere or do anything that allows her to be safe. This takes place, I'll go into the first book a little bit, I guess. And why am I blanking on our main character's name? Ness. And in our first one, Ness is part of this religious order, but mostly so that she can get food and housing. And in this world, is it Newham? Is the city, it's kind of like Gotham, it feels like Gotham, where there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of crime. In this world, there are nightmares, and if people fall asleep without taking this particular medicine and they have a nightmare, they risk becoming what they're afraid of in that nightmare in real life. And one of her family members, her sister, was killed by a nightmare, or became a nightmare and killed people. And so our main character has a lot of fear of these nightmares, either getting hurt by one or becoming one. And so anyway, so she's trying to protect herself by being part of this religious order. There is an assassination attempt that she survives. It wasn't targeted at her, but she's kind of caught up in this. And she is finding things out about society and about the group and people that she thought she trusted, and she's trying to just figure out what's going on. So in the second book, you know, things have happened in the first one. She is trying to find somewhere that feels like she can be safe, and the bar that she's working at definitely is not that. There are territorial disputes between different gangs, and there's gunfire that happens in this bar very frequently. She's trying to find another job. She's staying with one of her friends that we meet in the first book until she can kind of get back on her feet. She's trying to find does find a new job to try to feel safer, but is realizing that even that job isn't going to help keep her safe. And so ultimately, I'll just leave it at she's making a deal with a figure in a character that she knows it's dangerous to make a deal with, to try to make herself more, or make it feel like she's less vulnerable and make herself feel safer. And so, you know, of course, I'm sure things are gonna go wrong with this deal. Anyway, we'll see what happens, but I hope that kind of gives some context for this one. But I'm having a good time. And yeah, as I said, about a quarter of the way through. Saskia Marveld narrates the audiobook, which is always a grand time. So yeah, I'm going to continue listening to this one. It's halftime of the Cowboys game right now, and I hope the second half goes better than the first. We'll see. So I'm not reading right now because I'm stressed, but I have some other things to read as well. I have the meetup group that I have for an environmental book club. And I need to make sure I get that book read. There's the River of Silver live show that's going to be coming up, so I need to make sure that I'm reading that. Anyway, so there's definitely a lot to read. Oh, speaking of, I have read a short novella on Kindle recently, and I did finish it recently, so I'll briefly mention it here because I happened to finish it throughout the time of this vlog, and it's The Cybernetic Tea Shop. I'm blanking on the author's name, but I'll put an image here, and it was an absolute freaking delight. It's, again, a novella. I think the Kindle book is maybe 100 or so pages, and we're following a couple of characters. One is Clara, who kind of moves around a lot. She is a technician who works on, there are these kind of AI companion, like animal companions. So she has this little AI bird named Joni, for example, who's kind of a companion for her, and she's a technician that helps kind of fix people's animal companions when there's something wrong. We also have, our other main character runs a tea shop. Her name is Sal, and she is an AI of sorts, and she was built at a time where there were different laws around AIs, and so, you know, I don't think, my understanding was that she, you know, a AI like her couldn't be built in the present day, but you know, they haven't made sure that she's, you know, in terms of law enforcement, you know, law enforcement's not going to come get her and shut her down, but I don't think she would be built, or something like her couldn't be built in the present day with the AI laws that exist. But she is kind of not really accepted by some people in society. In fact, she keeps getting various, you know, break-ins and stuff at her shop targeting her because she's an AI, but she's trying to just live her life and run this tea shop. And anyway, so Clara moves to Seattle, which is where this novella takes place, and is, you know, has a similar job as a technician working on these animal robot companions, and meets Clara, kind of frequents her tea shop, and is trying to help her get through, you know, some of this stuff going on in terms of attacks and break-ins at her shop, and they're getting closer and closer. And it's just really charming. It's just really charming. I really love their dynamic, and it was just really cute. So if you're just looking for a short, cozy sci-fi novella, would recommend giving it a go. Anyway, just a bonus little review there, just because I finished it recently. I thought it was adorable. So yeah, I'm gonna keep watching this game and probably being an anxious ball of stress, and I'll check in once I've read more of Cage of Dreams. So to check in, I have finished Cage of Dreams, and this is by Rebecca Schaefer, and I had a lot of fun with this one. This is the conclusion to the duology. I think my only complaint, and I think I tried in the last clip to give a bit of context for the first one and where we're going with this one, with trying to give as little spoilers as possible. I think my only complaint about this one, so I was talking about the deal that she wanted to make, and of course things are going to get more complicated from there. I had a lot of fun. The only complaint is she spent a lot of time in this book talking about how scared she is, and we're in her head, and that's consuming her thoughts. So it's not that it doesn't make sense, but it is a lot, or feels like it is a lot of the book. And you know, we do see some growth here, so that's good. Anyway, I just wish it took up slightly less page time. And she also does a good job, though, I will say, kind of showing why our main character, the author, does a good job showing why our main character is that way, and things that are happening around her that are like external forces as well as internal ones that are kind of feeding those thoughts and feeding those thought spirals. Anyway, so I will say that, but I think that was my only complaint, though. But overall, I had so much fun with this one. And yeah, would highly recommend this duology for just a very different vibe and just kind of a different kind of feeling duology that is just a fun mix of different things, including vampires and superheroes and villains, and I think I mentioned kind of a Gotham like city environment with just different creatures and nightmares going on. Anyway, it's fun. It's entertaining. So I then did turn to, actually it's been a minute because I also in between Cage of Dreams and the next one have also finished The River of Silver by S.A. Chakraborty for a live show that's coming up in a couple of hours at the time of filming this. So I was working on that. I have the environmental book club meetup that I run. I have that meeting next week, and so I was making some progress. I need to make some more progress, but I've been making some progress on the book for that one because there's not an audiobook, so it is, and it's kind of a dense philosophy book, so it is really slow going. Anyway, but I have now started another book for this one, The Hemlock Queen by Hannah Witten, and this one was, I think the prompt was a poisonous plant in the name of the title. Anyway, this is the second book after The Foxglove King, and I'm a bit over halfway, but you know, maybe 2/3 of the way through or approaching that. And I'll talk a little bit about the first one. And again, it's kind of hard trying to continue series and vlogs like this. Like, how much can I say about a second book in a series? But I will do my best. So in the first one, we're following Lore, and her life gets kind of turned upside down when it is discovered that she can channel a type of magic called mortem. It's like a kind of death magic. And so she gets brought to the palace. She thinks that she's going to get executed because you're not supposed to have or use this type of magic. And so she thinks she's either going to get executed, imprisoned, something not good. And instead she's brought to the king and his advisors, and it turns out there are people dying, a kind of mass deaths that are occurring in really suspicious circumstances, and the king is trying to get to the bottom of it and wants her help trying to do that. And so he also is suspicious, the king is also suspicious of his son and heir, and so he wants her to kind of keep an eye on him. There's also kind of the religious figure that's involved here as well, and so she's trying to figure out what's going on. Of course, things get more complicated, and she's trying to figure out who she can trust in this situation. It was super fun. It was a lot of fun to explore the magic, explore the palace, explore the politics. And I'll just say that in this one, we're of course reeling from the events towards the end of the first book that I won't talk about, but she and some of the other characters are reeling from what happened there and trying to figure out what to do next, trying to figure out the right political moves. And there are some complications, of course, with her and another character, and I don't want to say too much about that complication, but they're trying to figure out how to undo something that is complicating their lives and affecting their ability to make these political maneuvers and hopefully bring peace and some sort of stability after what happened at the end of the first book. I'll just kind of leave it at that. And again, characters are trying to figure out who they can trust and what they should be doing in these situations. I'm having a good time. It feels a little bit slower paced than what I remember the first one feeling like, but maybe that's just because I'm not remembering my impression of kind of the pacing of the first one, or maybe this one just is a bit slower paced, which I'm not minding. I'm having a good time just hanging out in this world. So yeah, I will continue working on this one. I have some more stuff to get done around the house before the live show, so hopefully I can listen while I get some of that stuff done. And yeah, I'll check back in when I have finished this one. And I think I'll include the next book in this vlog and then cut it off, I think is what I'll do. So, talk to you later. So, I believe when we last checked in, I was a good portion of the way through the Hemlock Queen. That is upstairs. I'm not going to go get it at this point. I forgot to grab it. But I have now finished it, and I believe finished it on Tuesday as I was commuting to work. It's currently Friday, and I had a lot of fun with that one. I loved the Mortem magic. I loved getting to see different parts of this world that they were seeing for various reasons, and some of the politics. And of course, this gang of 20-somethings who for some reason are in charge of everything, because of course they are. And some of the side characters are super fun, and I enjoyed the gods aspect that was going on in this book, and their history and how that interplayed with what was going on. I'm intrigued to see what goes on in the third one. So definitely successful. Slightly less successful was the next one. I did read Sleep Like Death by Kaylin Barron, and this is an author I've read one book from before. I read Cinderella is Dead, and in fact this is set in that same world, but it is a standalone. In fact, if it hadn't mentioned it on the synopsis, I might not have really remembered or recognized that. But anyway, in this one we're following Eve, and there's this knight character in this town, and some people in this town are making deals, and this knight character is known for really screwing people over with the deals that he makes, and kind of making deals that, there's no way that they could ever truly fulfill their end of the bargain, or maybe they fulfill their end of the bargain, but what he brings to the table is not at all what they were expecting, even if technically to the letter it does what they he does what they asked, you know what I mean? And so ultimately Eve's family, Eve is the princess in this world, or at least of this area, this kingdom, and I think it's called Queensbridge, and her mom is the queen, and they have been screwed over by this knight character. And so, the queen has encouraged all of the people of Queensbridge to not make deals with him. Anyway, and so of course things get complicated. Eve has been training all of her life to try to go after this guy and, figure out a way to make sure that he doesn't harm the people of her kingdom anymore, in whatever way that can look like. And so that's kind of the basic setup. And she comes across the son of the knight, who is, in a sense, his enforcer, but also someone who is very much as beholden to the knight as a bunch of other people are. And doesn't really have a ton of choice in some things that he's doing, but is trying to do what he can to either make up for some of what his father has done, or anyway. So that's kind of the basic setup. We figure some of this out relatively quickly. Hopefully I'm not spoiling anything that's not on the dust jacket or not in the description, but that's the basic setup. And so it's really about her adventure, trying to figure out how she can go after this knight and the complications that come with that, and protecting her kingdom. Anyway, so very much a fairy tale story, and I'm trying to figure out if maybe I just wasn't in the mood for a fairy tale story. Maybe it's the writing. It's entirely possible it was the narration. I was listening to this one, and very inexperienced narrator from what I could see as far as other things that she's narrated, and ultimately I think wasn't successful, at least for me, in narrating this kind of story. So there can be a fine line in fairy tale stories between, so just with, for being, or a fine line, I guess, between it being whimsical, charming, and bringing in a lot of those elements, and ultimately a package that is successful, that can very easily cross into cliche or cliched writing or cliched dialogue, feeling like the story is very shallow, or feeling like the characters are shallow or a caricature of what they're supposed to be, because in some ways all of those elements are part of, or at least what I associate with, part of a style of fairy tale storytelling. And I love fairy tales, so this is something that typically works for me. And so that's not meant to bash fairy tale style of storytelling. It's usually very successful for me, and I really enjoy it. I'm just saying there can be a fine line, right? So I think at least for me, how I feel with fairy tale stories, sometimes it's intentional for you to kind of feel like you're floating above the story, looking down, in kind of a sense, is how at least I picture it in my head. It's very common for the characters to kind of start to fill a caricature of certain types of characters that you have in your mind, and that's the role that they fulfill in the story. And it's nice when authors can put different spins on it and use those caricatures for different reasons and kind of misdirect you, and I think that's ultimately where it can be successful. But it can be very old-timey, sometimes, again, bordering on cliche writing, where it can be pulled off successfully, or those things can start to bother you, or there can be a lot of telling and not showing. That is pretty common in the style of storytelling too, that you just get a little bit of history about something that's going on, or just little tidbits here and there of the world building or how the characters are supposed to feel, but maybe you're not really being shown why or how they're feeling. They're just... Anyway, I hope it's making sense for people who love fairy tales as much as I do, that some of those storytelling elements can come together and be something I really, really love, or can kind of go in another direction and ultimately just kind of add up to be things that don't really make a successful package and would bother me, or start to bother me where normally they wouldn't, if that makes sense. And I think maybe the narrator wasn't kind of delivering these lines in a way that was really selling the whimsy and that I usually associate with fairy tales, if that makes sense. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but there were definitely some things I liked about this, but maybe I'll need to try this physically in the future and see maybe if that's more successful. But I have now turned to my next one. Oh, by the way, I think this was for the prompt of an active word or a verb in the title, so I went with sleep for a verb in the title. And then I have now started a Curse of Blood and Wolves, and this was I think the prompt was to have jewelry on the cover, and so I'm going with her earrings there as jewelry on the cover. And yeah, anyway, and if I hadn't mentioned it earlier, as a reminder, the Hemlock Queen, I think the prompt there is a poisonous plant in the title, so that one worked out well. Anyway, so in this one we're following Ruby, who is coming home from, she works at a bar, and sometimes takes a shortcut through the woods to get home. Her sister is having some sort of episodes or things that go on where she kind of loses touch with reality, and Ruby can call her name, but basically her sister is not there, right? She's not mentally present, and she'll eventually kind of snap out of it and kind of regain her sense of self, but she can't really control when this happens, and it's starting to kind of get a little bit more severe in terms of how long it happens, or like how out of touch she becomes. And so she's trying to figure out what's going on. She's trying to take care of her sister through this process and try to figure out what's going on. She comes across our our wolf character here, and Rake, I think his name is, and so he kind of feels this pull towards her, and like sees her while she's in the woods, and at one point she realizes that she's kind of being followed. And anyway, at one point she's attacked by another wolf, and Rake protects her, and which is not something he felt like he would have needed to do, because wolves aren't supposed to attack humans. That's been part of their basically wolf code for I think 200 years at this point, and so it doesn't really happen very often. And wolves are kind of really taught not to do that. So he's trying to figure out who might have attacked her, what's going on, is there any connection with what's going on with Ruby's sister? Because her sister, in these kind of trances or moments where she's not really present, typically says they're coming or something to that effect, and that's really all she says. And so Ruby's trying to figure out who's coming, and is it wolves that are coming? They're not really sure. And so he's trying to make sure that she's protected. She ultimately allows this kind of protection role, and anyway, so that's kind of the setup here. And of course things continue from there, and it's fine. It's not taking itself too seriously. It's just kind of silly, but kind of silly in a fun way, and I'm having a good enough time to keep going with this one and just kind of see what happens and see where it goes. I do have a little bit of cleaning to do, so I'm going to continue listening, do that bit of cleaning, and then hopefully just be able to just chill and read for a bit, because I really need that. So that'll be the plan. So I'd started to talk about A Curse of Blood and Wolves. I actually intended to have this be a separate vlog and, wrap up the next couple of books in a separate vlog, but we're actually just going to make this 2 vlogs for Magical Readathon. And I started talking about this in the last clip. So I have finished A Curse of Blood and Wolves, and was this great? Not particularly. Is the writing for me anything special or to write home about? No. Did I have fun with it? Yeah. This is very much a fated mates insta-love situation. So I think I gave the basic premise in the other clip, that she's trying to figure out what's going on with her sister. We have Raph, who is following her in the woods, and they end up being, attracted to each other, and he's kind of protecting her from a wolf attack that happened, or after a wolf attack, he protected her from that, and then wants to continue to protect her from any other wolves attacking her, and is trying to figure out why that wolf attacked her in the first place. Anyway, so there's kind of those plot elements going on, but it is very much a fated mates insta-love, as I said, I can't live without you situation. They spend a lot of time in their feels about that. So if that's what you're in the mood for, give it a go. I did have some fun with it, and actually might continue in this series. We'll see. I am now halfway through Beneath These Cursed Stars by Lexi Ryan, so I'll talk about this for just a moment. And in this one, you're following Jocelyn, who is Bree's sister. So Bree is the main character in the duology that has come out that establishes this world. Is it These Hollow Vows? Is that the first one? Anyway, so we're set in the same world, but it is very much chronologically after the events of the duology, so I would recommend reading the duology first so that you're not spoiled for anything that happens, which is also going to make this a little bit harder to talk about, because I part of the setup, not anything that's anyway, parts of the setup I think I don't want to talk about, because if you haven't read the duology, then I want you to enjoy that. I had a lot of fun with the duology, and I'm having fun with this one so far as well. But we're following her sister, after the events of the first book, there are a series of mass fae deaths that are going on. And so, you know, there's that situation. And so she is kind of brought into a situation where she is brought into a group who's trying to investigate what's going on, correct what's going on, figure out that situation. And there is someone who is taking her place kind of where she normally lives so that people there aren't suspicious, and it's for reasons. Anyway, so for reasons, someone is kind of taking her place and living her daily life, but she is going to help figure out what's going on. And of course, you know, realizing that the politics is complicated, you know, will they kind of reface some bad things that they were facing in the duology? You know, are some bad magic, or is some bad magic and some bad powers, like, are they coming back into fruition? So, you know, that's kind of the larger question they're facing is, you know, they thought some things were put to rest and resolved. Were they actually? And so I'm having a grand time with this one. I am enjoying both storylines. It's mostly Jocelyn's, and I think I'm kind of enjoying that part of the story slightly more at this point, but it's also more of the story. So, at least at this point. But having a good time, and it is September 30th. It is Monday, the final day of the Readathon. So I did have one more book that I intended to read for this one. That is the Atlas, which one is it? The Atlas Complex. The third book in the Atlas 6 series, because it had a compass on the cover. But I think I'm gonna put that one off. I originally had read it and kind of marked it as a fall story because, you know, it's kind of dark academia adjacent. At least the first one felt more that way, but the second one I think didn't really feel as much like a fall or a spooky season vibed book to me. But it did fulfill the last prompt and was one of the only things, or is the only thing I have on my physical TBR that fit that prompt. But if we're putting off 2 other books anyway, then I would rather do another vlog at some point in the future with the Atlas Paradox, A Day of Fallen Night, and the TJ Klune book I was talking about that has a phoenix on the cover. Is it Somewhere Beyond the Sea? Anyway, I want to read those, and I want to read them in a separate vlog. And I want to focus on spooky season reads while it is October, since it's going to be October tomorrow. So we're just going to put a pause on those, read some spooky books, and I think what I'm going to do for October maybe is have a spinner wheel, decide which book I read, and have just a set of books that I'm excited about for spooky season on a spinner wheel. We'll see. I think that's what I'm going to do. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here and just leave it at 2 vlogs for Magical Readathon, with a third one to come later. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more bookish content. I'll leave my Instagram link down below, as well as more information about how you can support the Black Lives Matter movement, and I will see you in October for spooky season. So get excited, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.